What's up, everybody? I am Jesse, or GameOverJesse as some of you all may know me, and here with me, as always, is Daniel. And then we have good champion Ashley and
hello,
the good Miss Click. We had interviews with both of them prior to this with... What in the world?
What?
You have a shoulder.
Miss Click.
Oh, jeez!
Alright.
It's alive!
Maybe
Oh, gosh.
I misspoke. The not so good Miss Click.
She's there, Miss Click.
Yeah. Miss Clicks. Okay, so we are joined...
I just had to have a moment.
Yeah, we have been joined
There's the meme
by
face.
Daniel.
Someone make a meme of that.
Alright.
Ooh.
So we've been joined by Daniel, Ashley, and Miss Click's shoulder.
We are all here.
Yes.
At Miss Click's shoulder.
We are here. We had interviews early with all of the guests, and we went over a bunch of news topics that you can click back and watch. But we're all here right now for the mailbag. If you have any questions that you would like to have answered on our next video, please comment them below, and we will get to as many as possible. If you would like a guarantee that your question is answered, you can head over to patreon.com/GameOverJesse and leave your question, or join our Discord as a Patreon member, and your question will take priority above many of the others, just as our first question from the one has. He says, GameOverJesse, King Bergerson, looking at the Zelda timeline, how much time do you think has passed between each game? Now, we can't go through individually and say how much time has passed.
We can only give an estimate.
Yeah, and there's...
So, like, on average.
Yeah, and there's
with
so
a
many
few exceptions.
There's so many different games that if you went through each individual game, we would be here for another hour. So,
Right.
like, between Breath of the Wild and any of the other games...
It's like 10,000 years.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, they
10,100 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
and then
10,000 between the first Legend, and then however many before the Legend and the other games.
Yeah, and then
So it
there
could be
are
more.
games like Majora's Mask or Phantom Hourglass to where it's like minutes.
Direct. Yep.
Or, yeah. Like,
yeah, I would,
maybe
the
an hour.
first Zelda game and Zelda 2, I think that's a 7-year gap, where it's like Zelda 1's Child Link, and Zelda 2, he turned 17. So there's like, it really depends. Like the Oracle games, they end right at the beginning of Link's Awakening. Then there's like the 10,000-year gap for Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, and then
it's all over the place.
games like Wind Waker and Ocarina of Time, there's a few hundred years.
A few hundred years. Same Twilight Princess.
Like there's
no Ocarina of Time.
Even Nintendo's been a bit vague on it. Like there's been interviews where like either Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker or Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess, like there's interviews where they say there's 100 years that's passed, like just 100. But then there's interviews where they say there's hundreds. So there's never a precise, and I think that's intentional. Nintendo wants to keep it kind of vague. That way there's not an exact time. But
Right.
yeah, like what... I guess a quick way to kind of reword this a bit is what, like if you could go through any of the times, the gaps between the Zelda games, and you could place another Zelda game there to explore what happened in between, what
Yeah.
2 times would you pick? Like, would it be between Wind Waker and Ocarina of Time to see the flood? Would it be between A Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time? Between Skyward Sword, the Minish Cap?
I said in my notes maybe 5,000 to 7,000 years, but even now I think that might be a bit too long. Maybe that might be 2,000 to 3,000 years. Might be a more realistic estimate rather than maybe 5,000 or 7,000 years.
Between which games?
Any game, honestly. Like if all of the games like
except for like
happened-
direct sequels like Majora's Mask.
Yes.
But
Yeah. All right. So, but if you could go through, Ashley, and just pick 2 games that you could put a game in between, what would it be? Like if it was between Wind Waker and Ocarina of Time, or Twilight Princess and Four Swords Adventures, Minish Cap, Skyward Sword, like where would you put a game in between? to explore what happened between that time?
Maybe 1,000 years might be a good enough for Ocarina of Time to Wind Waker. I think because the sages they have like glass pans in Hyrule Castle, and I think that maybe 1,000 years is a good time frame because 2,000 and onward would probably be a bit too long, where people would pretty much forget that what the sages looked like. So I think that maybe 1,000 years in between Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker would be the optimal time period.
Yeah.
Not too long, but also not too short.
Well, I like that makes sense, but I think in interviews and stuff, like Nintendo said that it's been like a few hundred years between. But I was asking, like, if you could pick between two games to where you could set your own game to explore what happened between that time, what two games would you pick to put a game between? Is what I was asking.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misheard you.
Oh no, it's fine. I took his question and we kind of reworked it to something else that we could actually discuss. So
I think Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess, we need to know about the Hero Shade. And I think that would be the perfect spot to finally answer that question.
yeah, how Link became the Hero Shade, how he died or whatever.
How he lost his
He
eye.
got lost in the woods.
No.
No.
You don't believe that?
No.
I think you need to watch
No.
our video
No.
about Zelda theories that we've done before.
No.
Or at least
I
if he did
personally
not
dare
as
go
Child
there.
Link. He might have like way later down the line
Yeah.
as
yeah.
adult when he became
Yeah.
an adult, but like definitely not as Child Link.
Yeah.
No,
'cause-
not Childlink, no.
yeah, well, there's like the theory of like the Link is dead theory. It goes like,
I don't believe that.
Yeah,
No. And I know you
it's-
talk about that with Hollow, too.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
so it's like, oh, so you seen that video where we talk about
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Because it's like everyone believes like Link died in the woods or the Lost Woods as a child, and then proof of that they say is like the game.
Children in the woods become become
Anybody
skull
who gets
children.
lost, anybody who gets lost becomes a Stalfos.
Yeah.
is what the little girl
But
tells
then,
you, and
like-
but that just goes to prove that would be Twilight Princess.
Yeah,
Essentially, if
they-
you wanted to argue that.
They use the like the 5 stages of grief in Majora's Mask as an example, but then there's interviews with the people, not Al Numa, but the director of Majora, or not the director, like the other person that was in charge of the story, or it could have been Al Numa, I forget, but they literally said that because when Majora's Mask 3D released, they were asked about that, and he literally said if you play through Majora's Mask with that in your mind, that each area is attributed to just one emotion, then you're playing the game wrong, because each area shows a lot more emotion than just depression
Right.
or anger or whatever.
Right.
But the other thing is that the skeleton for Link as the Hero Shade is an adult, and then Link in Twilight
Right.
Princess, at first it was a rumor, but then Nintendo confirmed it, that Link in Twilight Princess is like the grandson or like the great-great-grandson or whatever of Link from Ocarina of Time. So it's like if Link dies as a child in Majora's
he wouldn't have
Mask...
had a chance to live his life.
Yeah.
Then Twilight Princess Link would never exist.
Exactly. So
Right.
he probably grew up, married Malin, whatever her name is, or whoever, and then yeah. So that's the theory. Like, get out. But anyways,
Yeah.
Ashley, you said you would like to see a game set between Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess to see exactly how
With
the
the
Hero
Hero of
Shade
Time.
comes. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Third Hero of Time game.
yeah, I want a third Hero of Time game too, but
Yeah.
I don't want it to take place after Majora's Mask. I would want it to take place between Ocarina of Time and
Wind
A Link
Waker
to
is
the
what-
Past.
Oh, A Link to the Past. Okay.
Yeah, because like Link dies there, but it's like
So you want to retcon that timeline thing
Well,
and have an
see,
alternate ending?
my theory whenever Zelda Wii U was just known as Zelda Wii U or whatever, and then we only had the first trailer of Breath of the Wild, my theory of where it took place was that the third timeline split's caused by Link dying or whatever. So my thought was, instead of the downfall timeline being Link literally dying and then that causing it, was that before Ganon did the final blow to Link, similar to the final blow that you have to do to Ganondorf. Instead of the sages and Zelda using their power to seal Ganondorf or Ganon, which is what happens when you beat Ganon, they use their power on a dying Link to like seal him or like warp him somewhere. And it's all of the power of the sages and Zelda using their combined power to save Link. It was enough to cause the split. So that's what I was thinking, because at that time, the only thing we had to go on is the game starts out with Link being revived in the Chamber of Resurrection. And in my head, the only time Link canonically died was in Ocarina of Time. So my thought was they did that, took him to, or sent him wherever, sealed him in the Chamber of Resurrection. He's coming back to life. Link wasn't there to stop Ganon. That's why Hyrule's in ruins. Ganon's in the castle, because that's where he was sealed at in Ocarina of Time. Because they couldn't seal him in the Sacred Realm or wherever they ended up. So that was my whole convoluted theory, and it made sense for the time, for what we knew, but now we don't. But I would still like to see something akin to that. So yeah, that's what I was thinking. But I would like to see a game take place between Skyward Sword and Minish Cap. They talk about the Hero of Man or something like that.
Yeah.
But
we all thought that would be Breath of the Wild Link.
Yeah, there was theories on that as well, but they never show like who that Link was or any of that. So I would like to see that, because that's the only hero that we've really been told about that wasn't someone that we've played. Like, we've played the Hero of Light, the Hero of Wind, the Hero of Time, the Hero of the Wild, all these different heroes. But then Minish Cap mentions this hero that maybe Capcom intended on following up with a prequel at some point, but then they weren't able to with Nintendo, so they were like kind of setting the stages to do a prequel, but they never got the chance. I don't know. But I think that would be interesting. But with you, Miss Click, where would you like to see a game?
I'm actually, so, not that I necessarily would like to see a game, but I think it'd be cool if perhaps, you know, they say the hero is defeated. You know, that could pertain to Ocarina of Time, but what if they actually set up a game to where maybe you actually play through and you aren't successful? Like, maybe you do everything as a player that you can to defeat Ganon, and you think you've defeated it, and then something in a cutscene happens, and then he's killed. Like, I think that'd be cool. Like, now that you mentioned that, because, you know, you talk about the fallen timeline, but I don't know, it's hard for me to believe, you know, mainly because you don't see it in Ocarina of Time that Link possibly fails, because you're like, well, I literally beat him. You know, and I literally watched this all happen. So I think, now that we've mentioned it, I think it would be cool if you actually had a game where it was like, plot twist. You know, like, I feel like in Skyward Sword there was enough of a scolding when Impa tells you, you were late. If it wasn't for me, she would have died. How, you know, like, how dare you? You want to see her, you were gonna let her die. Like, that was enough of a spanking, you know, as it was. So I think that that would be cool. But to kind of continue on the Skyward Sword thought is, I would, even though we already know what happens, I would love to see, like, a game before Skyward Sword. I think that'd be really cool. I think it'd be very, like, I don't think it would happen, since we have, you know, like, the kind of like manga or whatever already made about that, and you already have, you know, the opening scene of Skyward Sword. But then after Skyward Sword, I would really like to see between from their timeline of between Skyward Sword and Minish Cap, you know, because you have, like, you know, after the Sky era, you have, you know, era of chaos and prosperity, and you hear about all these, you know, like the tales before. But I would like to see, like, Hyrule before it's, you know, fully established.
Yeah,
you know,
you don't
like,
get to see Hyrule filled in Skyward Sword.
Like,
That would be
Hyrule,
like Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess, where you get these questions and there could be a game that could answer them.
Yeah.
yeah.
I see that.
Yeah. So I don't know. I would just like to see it, because, like, even Minish Cap, you know, Four Swords, it's like, it's not necessarily focusing on, you know, Hyrule as a complete kingdom and stuff like that. Yeah, I know you have Zelda and stuff, but I just think it would be really cool to kind of see, I don't know, maybe, like, it was really cool with Skyward Sword to see, you know, where the body, you know, of the bird came from, and you found out that bird's called a Loftwing, and how their emblem not even, like, that was the emblem, and then all of a sudden, like, then it became the Triforce, you know, on top of the Loftwing's body, and I thought that was so cool to see it come into place and get a purpose. And then all of a sudden, it's like, now it's got Breath of the Wild, you had the revisit, but every time you see the Master Sword now, you think of Fi, because she's there, And though she might not be able to physically talk to you, you know that she is like there. So it was really cool to like have something to go back on and look at. So I think from there it would kind of be like the establishment of Hyrule Castle, you know, or of Hyrule Castle Town, you know, all these different things, like maybe not the exact incarnation we saw in Ocarina of Time, but to still be able to see those things come into fruition, I think that'd be really cool.
Yeah, you mentioned Fi. Even in Breath of the Wild, there's a mention of like a voice trying to talk to Zelda from the sword.
Yeah, in the sword, yeah. Yeah.
All right, so what about you,
Well,
Daniel?
plus the Master Sword makes that...
Oh my
in one
gosh,
of the
I
memories,
started
it makes
crying.
the sound. I was just like,
Yeah.
it is.
I started crying. Like, I heard it. It was like my text.
Oh, yeah.
I'm on my phone.
I remember when I saw the cutscene and I heard that sound. I'm like,
I instantly cried.
Like, she's back.
I cried on live stream.
Oh,
Everyone's like, "Don't cry," and I'm
It's
like, "Yeah, you love that."
Just Fi pops in. It's like, Master, the batteries in your Switch are at 10%.
that would be expectation subversion at its
It's so
finest.
funny. People complain about that, and I was like, "But why didn't you just switch the batteries?" And they're like, "I was too lazy," and I was like, "You made it worse than it had to be."
Yeah. But like you said, it's really neat how Skyward Sword as a prequel to sort of everything had an effect on how you view the rest of the games, because like for me, as soon as I played Skyward Sword, I went and played Ocarina of Time over again. And there was sort of a moment then where when you play it and you're going through Hyrule, it's like, okay, it's all fun and good. You get the Hylian shield and you see the red Loftwing, you're like, the only red Loftwing was Link's in Skyward Sword. Like, it's an important symbol now, like that. It was just kind of there before, but now it has more meaning. And then there's the cutscene in Ocarina of Time when you open the Temple of Time, which was previously the Sealing Temple, right? And it just adds more magnitude to that moment, especially when you see the Master Sword and Navi's like, it's that legendary blade. And I'm like, it's been sitting there for years, like since I just put it there when I finished Skyward Sword, it's been just sitting there for years until Link got it just now. Like, and it just, for me, like Ocarina of Time was a game I played as a kid, like to death, hundreds of hours. And then suddenly it was like, I was seeing this game in a new light, you know, and it really enhanced it. It's like
everything became more personal. The legend became more real.
Exactly, It's like Rogue One is to A New Hope now. It's the same thing. Like I watched Rogue One and then I watched A New Hope.
Now you know the names
and I'm
of
just
the
like,
people. Yeah.
Dude, Darth Vader's so angry because he just went on a slaughter fest. Look at this.
Something about what you just said.
The Master Sword. Oh, I'm sorry, Jesse, but yanking up the Master Sword feels so much more important than it did in other games. In other games, it's, you're getting a new piece of sword, but now it's like you're reuniting with a friend, and that's just so beautiful. Yeah. Without even knowing it.
I think. Yeah. Oh, can I add something really quick? I just got chills. Ooh. Wouldn't it be cool though if you had a game where Link pulls, like, maybe not one as soon as he pulls the Master Sword, but like he has this moment where, like, maybe this is like the very end of the timeline or something, where like this is like Fi, you know, like knows this is it or whatever, but like something happens, he's holding the sword and he has a flashback of like every single Link that like ever happened. Like she's able to feed all this like data information. You think of like Avatar Last Airbender, where you're able to gain memories of like previous avatars and stuff like that. Like how cool would that be? And like they would show maybe like cutscene renditions of, you know, like these 2D sprite games, you know, we've seen for the longest time, and then you see actions that refer to those games, and you'd be like, oh my gosh, like I was there, like I've seen all this happen, and you feel like Fi, you like want to tell, like when the Wind Waker Link pulls out, you know, the sword, you know, and he looks just like a really just like determined kid. You're like, kid, if I could tell you the stories that this sword has been through, what would I tell you? You know, I just like to have that moment. I think that'd be like so cool. Very far-fetched, but to have like that Avatar moment. Oh.
And you know, with when you mentioned the Wind Waker, when I saw it, I like after playing Skyward Sword, I went like a little Zelda nuts, especially with the timeline. And so like I was like the one of those crazy timeline theorists. I had like a wall of sticky notes.
Not crazy at all. Yeah.
No, it's like that. There's that meme where it's like me trying to explain the Zelda timeline, and it's the guy from Parks and Recs guy, and he's So that was me. That was totally me.
That's Kingdom Hearts, guys, in a nutshell.
Yeah, but this was before Hyrule Historia was actually released, right? So that was all I had to go on.
It's still that way now.
I was really close, but I just didn't anticipate the third split. But I had sort of the split idea in mind. But when I went play, and I played through like all the Zelda games that I had ownership of at that time, including I went out deliberately bought a new copy of Wind Waker because at that time my old copy I had lent to a girlfriend that I was dating, and then we broke up, and then she kept it, and I was like, not worth it to go get it back.
I would have drove over there and been like, give me my child.
I just went and bought it again. So, but yep, exactly. But that moment, like in Wind Waker, when you pull out the Master Sword, it's sort of its weakened state, and the handle's like inwards, the crossguard, and the gem has no color to it. And then when you're building the Master Sword in, or forging it in Skyward Sword, it takes on a similar shape before it's fully powered up, right? Yeah. So it's like it's connecting these ideas, and so when you go back to play Wind Waker, you're like, oh, it's not complete, you know, you gotta power it up. So. I'm way off topic though, but I'm just geeking out.
We're all very off topic.
We're all geeking out over here.
We need to move on.
Yeah. But, before we, what are you gonna say?
I was like, I guess I should say my answer to the question.
Oh yeah. Well,
between which game?
Before you get to that, I was going to say when you were talking about, and Miss Click mentioned it as well. You see the Loftwing on the Hylian shield before you ever knew it's a Loftwing, because in Ocarina of Time you see the bird with the Triforce and everything. But if you remember, the original shield for Ocarina of Time, we had the video with Hardcore Games a while back where people can go and watch, and it has a lot of images of the shield at different stages. And there are versions of the Hylian shield before the official Hylian shield that we know now. There wasn't the bird. It was just the Triforce taking up the entire shield. So who knows if they thought about birds being in Zelda game or the Loftwings being in Zelda games before they put it on the shield. So it's like if the shield design would have remained the way it originally was, could we have potentially never even gotten Loftwings? Like, could they have been after Twilight Princess going to make Skyward Sword, and they're like, oh, why don't we, since this is an origin, why don't we explain the origin of the shield, the origin of the sword? And then they looked at the shield.
I don't think they had that in mind. I think they were just like, hey, let's just make this gameplay element, because I think Eiji Aonuma has said before that gameplay comes first. Story comes later. I think that it didn't really matter to them whether or not the Loftwing image was in Ocarina of Time. It was just hey, let's make a new mount that isn't Epona, because we're in the sky, and Epona isn't a unicorn and can't fly as much as I wish she was. But
well, I mean, the entirety of pretty much going back is, I mean, it's kind of like Star Wars too. I mean, there wasn't too much leading up, you know, the original trilogy that necessarily told you the events that happened of, you know, the prequels and stuff like that. So it's pretty much just like, hey, we want to give this, you know, an origin story. Let's tie it into key elements that might not seem like a big deal and make them a big deal.
Well,
I don't think it was designed with that in mind originally.
No,
just
I wasn't saying.
On later and,
No, I know. Yeah.
I wasn't saying that they designed the shield in Ocarina of Time to eventually make a game where there were birds. Like, I wasn't saying that. I was saying, like, if they wouldn't have put the Loftwing or that symbol on the Hylian shield, whenever they were making Skyward Sword,
how different would it have been?
Yeah, like, would they have had the Loftwing in mind to be like, hey,
they even
we
have
should
been in the sky though?
Yeah, like,
well, actually, apparently the sort of the inspiration for Skyward Sword, part of it was they had like done Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and then Spirit Tracks, and apparently one of the developers' kids had made a comment like, okay, now he's had a horse and a boat and a train. What's next? Is he gonna fly? And then they're like, maybe we can make him fly, and so they made it where he rides a bird. So. Like something that was like an offhanded comment by one of the developers' kids ended up becoming like a huge part of what made kind of the game its own identity.
That doesn't explain Nintendo. I don't know what does.
That's Nintendo in a nutshell.
The heart of a child. The heart of a child.
Yeah. Well, it's like Wind Waker Link's design was based off one of the developers' kids' drawings, apparently. So there you go. There's your factoids of the day.
Miss Click.
Move on.
Yeah, Miss Click. If you're looking at the thing, take us into our next question. I think it's from Zelda Blazer.
Zelda Blazer?
Yeah.
So, Zelda Blazer asked, do you think Nintendo will come out with a Zelda game quickly like they did with Majora's Mask? Do you think time travel will be implemented into another game? And what game did Nintendo do the best? Okay, so this is like 3 questions in one.
I didn't even realize
All right.
that.
There you go.
Question number
May I?
1. Will Nintendo
may
come
I,
with the Zelda game
Yeah,
quickly?
Ashley?
Ashley,
Since
go.
I'm the Majora's Mask nut, I think I should be the one to take this. About the Zelda game coming out quickly, Majora's Mask was an incredibly special case. I know the story like the back of my hand, where the Nintendo 64 disc drive, they wanted DLC to Ocarina of Time. They wanted new dungeons and everything, but Shigeru Miyamoto said, to hell with that, I don't want to do that, I want to make a new game. And the higher-ups at Nintendo said, yeah, go on, but you only have 1 year to complete a game, which is why a lot of the assets are recycled from Ocarina of Time. I don't think that they'll ever do that again. That was an incredibly in-the-moment case where you get your wish, but they have to do it in an incredibly short amount of time. And when there was promotion going on for Majora's Mask 3D, Eiji Aonuma said that he has nightmares about that year of him working on Majora's Mask, and I don't think that he and his team will ever go through that again. I don't think they'll ever do that again. And about the time travel question, Skyward Sword is the most recent Zelda game to implement time travel, and yes, it is almost a series novelty, but I don't think that they'll actually do time travel much anymore, because Ocarina of Time did it, Majora's Mask did it, and then for a while, I don't think that... Well, Phantom Hourglass involved stopping time, but that was only for, like, one game, and it's only doing one part of time, but I think that maybe they're going to start laying off of the time travel and the Marty McFly stuff, but yeah, I don't think time travel will be as big of a thing as it was in earlier games. And about in what game did Nintendo do the best job on time travel? And for me, Majora's Mask, but I wanted you guys to hear what Nintendo game do you think Nintendo did the best at handling time travel? This is going out to all of you guys.
Are we answering
we're,
other two
we're all
questions?
supposed to answer the questions anyway.
Yeah, let's
All right, then
Yeah.
go on
keep
ahead.
going.
Yeah, like with it being developed quickly, like as Ashley said, Majora's Mask was a special case. But then if you look at Wind Waker, that game was only in development for like 2 years. But then
Yeah,
that was pretty quick too.
from like 2000 to 2002.
it was like 01 to 03 or something like that.
Yeah, and then Twilight Princess was when it really started taking a really long time. It took like 5 or 6 years to cover. Yeah, about 5 years.
four.
To,
So it launched 2006, 2007, but then it got delayed.
yeah, and then Skyward Sword took like 5 years to come out, and then
Yep.
Breath of the Wild took 6. So if the pattern
It took
continues,
20 years for Breath of the Wild.
Yeah,
Or
so-
no, sorry, it felt like 20 years for Breath of the Wild.
if the pattern continues, it would take 7 years for the next Zelda game. But I think if like they reuse the same engine, like a lot of people think they are, which I think Nintendo's going to do, because I think they're tired of
I think
spending
they've hinted at it, yeah.
so long
Yeah.
working. Like there's
And
even
that was the part that took them the longest to develop in Breath of the Wild as well, was
physics
making that
the,
engine.
the physics
Yeah.
engine. So like the engine's already perfected, so like they could make some more minor tweaks to it. The only thing that we know about the next big Zelda game is that Nintendo, or Aonuma, said that he wanted to take like the engine from Breath of the Wild and combine it with what he's learned from like the multiplayer of Triforce Heroes. So we don't really know what that means. It could be multiplayer towards like very, very simple multiplayer, or it could be full-on multiplayer like Triforce Heroes or Hyrule Warriors. We don't really know, but I think you can expect the next big Zelda game in like 2 years from now. Like I don't think it'll come out in a year like Majora's Mask did with Ocarina of Time, but they built the entire game of Wind Waker in like 2 years. So I think they could easily, especially if they're reusing the engine from Breath of the Wild, I don't think it would take that long. Especially because like they already showed off a bunch of stuff during one of the game developers conferences where they had the Minish, they had the alien space attack. If you guys seen the trailers or whatever, where they showed off a lot of stuff that they didn't even end up using in Breath of the Wild. So I think there's just like so much stuff that they made for Breath of the Wild that they could easily bring over to the next game, especially since they didn't use traditional dungeons.
Right. Well, I mean, you even think of like the physics of Breath of the Wild with more traditional aspects that a lot of people say they're wanting to revisit. Like, how cool would that be? You know, like you have so many other things. Like, I mean, imagine like a temple where you could actually use a climbing mechanic. You know, like how awesome! Like, and I think that that's something that is so revolutionary in a open world game. Like, I played Horizon Zero Dawn after I played Breath of the Wild, and it was very frustrating to play a new open world game but not be able to climb surfaces. And like you had to like find specific ledges and stuff, and I'm like, well, if Link was here, he could climb it. I just need to build up my stamina, you know. But I think like they have such a good thing going for them in the fact that they developed such I want to say a strong and robust engine, and that's very Zelda-like. That I feel like they could do so many different things with the games, different settings, different, you know, times, and different, you know, like, I would love to see the runes again, but I feel like that's such a specific, you know, like, item of, like, every game has its own item, and I feel like maybe we probably won't see those again, unless it did end up coming after Breath of the Wild somehow, you know, in a sequel, but, like, their engine is, like, probably, like, one of my favorites, and it's super accurate, too, like, the amount of detail they put into that, it was... I applaud. I applaud.
Yeah, it's really cool. What about you, Daniel? What?
Okay, well, let's start from the top here. I don't think Nintendo will come up with a Zelda game super quickly, just because you know, they're gonna, if they do announce one for like next year or whatever, they're gonna delay it. It's just how they do.
They never churn out yearly titles anyway. That's just how they are.
Yeah.
Or if they do, they're gonna pad it out with some remakes or maybe a 3DS Zelda game.
Skyward HD. Skyward HD.
2021, I'm telling you. I keep telling you, 2021, Skyward Sword HD. But there are rumors
that wouldn't even be on the Switch. But, that would end up being on like whatever the next Nintendo console would be.
No, it needs to be on the Switch.
Like if it came out in 2021, I don't think it would even be.
Skyward, yeah.
Yeah.
Would work.
But anyways, yeah. So I don't think they'll turn it out real fast either. Like Ashley said, it's kind of a Majora's Mask was a special case that they may not revisit. That idea. Time travel. I love time travel mechanics in games. I'm all about that. I used to play the Prince of Persia: Sands of Time. That game has a really good use of time travel. That was not Nintendo, that was Ubisoft, but I had it on my GameCube, so it's back in the day. As far as Zelda games, I think really Zelda games handle time travel the best in general, as far as Nintendo games go. And I gotta agree, like, I think like Majora's Mask had probably the best use of it, just because it had the 3-day cycle, and then you had the most control over it. But something I really liked in Ocarina of Time's time travel was that your sort of actions in the past had like direct effect on the future. Whereas with Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword, the time travel was really just like you just stepped into the past in this one dungeon.
Well,
or this
even
one
Wind
segment.
Waker, there was like the small segments of time travel. Like when you was it the Temple of Time when like you had to go back in time and the temple was all black and white, or like
That's
time
Twilight
was frozen.
Princess, not Wind Waker.
No, it was frozen in time.
There was like that.
Oh
in Wind
no,
Waker
yeah,
as well.
that was frozen in time.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like time, like you weren't going. I never assumed that it was going back in time. I always just thought that it was just sort of this area that was sort of frozen in its bubble.
Frozen in time. It wasn't like back into the past.
But like Skyward Sword's time travel was like kind of weird. I liked the idea of it, that like the climax was in the past, and then like
I
Zelda
really
was really
liked it.
there at the temple the whole time. I thought that was like that was really neat writing, especially with Impa
too.
sort of showing
Spoilers.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and spoilers for this game that came out 7 years
2011.
ago. So 7 years ago, guys. But Ocarina of I really like that Ocarina of Time. Like you go back in time, this child Link plant a beanstalk, and then you go into the future 7 years, and it's sprouted, right? And just like little things like that, I thought that was really neat. You're going back in time, you get the silver gauntlets, and then you can wear them as adult Link, and then complete the Spirit Temple. Like the Spirit Temple especially is one of my favorite Zelda dungeons because you have to do part of it in the past and the second half of it as an adult. I really love that. But
yeah.
I was gonna say Majora's Mask, but Ashley took that answer. So
Yeah. Someone in the chat mentioned that you forgot the time shift stones, but
I was gonna say time.
Okay,
shift
that
stones.
actually the time shift stones were really cool.
Yeah.
I really liked that because that was sort of another cool time travel mechanic, but it was like very isolated with just this bubble that you have essentially. Like that was like one of the coolest mechanics of that game. You know, like if they had built a whole game around just that, I'd totally like it would probably be an indie game that would do something like that because you don't see a lot of huge AAA games that
really
just have
cool.
like one
I'd like
thing.
to see more from that.
But yeah, that was real cool, and especially when they sort of like hint at the material that time shift stones are made of, like, oh, this maybe the Ocarina of Time is made out of the same material,
and it could be the Sheikah Slate. I don't see my theory. Shameless plug.
I personally always thought that like the time shift technology, and all the ancient technology in Skyward Sword was the same technology as like the Tower of Gods and the Sheikah in Breath of the Wild. I always thought it was kind of they were linked in in some way, but yeah, that's is there another part of this question? It's a long one. And what? Yeah. No, I covered it. I covered my grounds.
Yeah, I think we can move on to the next one.
Yes,
move on.
Ashley, if you want to take this next question to read.
Lead away.
I don't know how to say that name, so
Tyrell Ocful, maybe? I don't know.
It's just an awful name to pronounce.
Alright,